we're going to move to step 1, part 3, which is, as was explained to me by one of my friends that I met in AA, the idea is, well, it says that we are sure our way of living has its advantages for all in the big book. And I'm wondering, well, this whole powerless over alcohol inventory, if I score that I don't have the allergy and I score that I don't have the obsession, then how does this program work for me? And he said, if you read step 1 carefully, it says, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I said, yeah. He said, well, what Bill Wilson meant with that hyphen was that we're admitting 2 things in step 1. We're admitting we're powerless over alcohol. That's the allergy and the obsession, the alcoholic mind. And by the way, please refer back to the Chalk Talk if you don't understand those before you take that inventory that we just talked about. Now, this is not in the Chalk Talk, what we're going to pick up here. This guy told me that Bill Wilson meant this. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, end of that thought, beginning of a new thought. We admitted that our lives had become unmanageable. He said, Dennis, can you admit that your life is unmanageable? I said, well, what do you mean by that? Looked up the definition of unmanageable. Unable to achieve one's own purpose. Are you having trouble making your life go the way you want it to go? Unable to achieve one's own purpose. So I realized that for me, step 1 is admitting that my life has become unmanageable. And in that respect, the AA 12-step program can have its advantages for all. Let me define a couple of things here. Let's start with ego. In psychology, we would call this our ego, our conscious self. That's everything that I'm aware of about myself. My memories, my senses, my feelings, my emotions, it's all part of my conscious. My conscious self is the part that you see here. Your conscious self is everything that's sitting in that chair. That's your ego. Ego can get a bad rap in culture and in AA, but it's really not a bad thing. Your ego is a lot of what you are. It's who you are. It's your 5 senses. That's directed by your 5 senses. And your volition, your ability to make choices in life based on your perceptions, your memories, your 5 senses. Now, the alcoholic has an alcoholic mind, which limits his ability to say no to the first drink sometimes. And this is, Kevin pointed out a break. He said, you know, Dennis, a lot of people understand the allergy to alcohol, but almost nobody understands what you're talking about there, that alcoholic mind, that inability to bring into consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. So that inventory is very critical to see that. Our ego can become an actor. It can go into itself and build a shell around itself. And every person becomes an actor. I don't care if it's an alcoholic or not. I've never met anybody that I would say is not an actor. We develop an act to try to run the whole show. Let me read a couple of things. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? These are all in the reading as it's called out in our guidebook on page 7. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he's more likely to have varied traits. Here's another little statement. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. So what I'm describing here, the ego as an actor is self-centered. He's dependent on his own ability to keep his own ego safe. His ego lives a defensive life, keeps trouble out. How do I keep trouble out? I keep trouble out by an act. I'm really good at a certain kind of act. Which kind of act do I have? It could be, if I back up a notch, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. Most people would not call that self-centered or selfish. But it is self-centered because of the very fact that it's me keeping me safe. It's all about my ego keeping itself safe. My ego has lost its way. My ego is here for the purpose of keeping itself safe in the world. And everybody does it. I heard in Sunday school, all have sinned, all have fallen short of the glory of God. And the way I look at that today, after taking the advice of my AA friends and doing these 12 steps, is that all have acted, all have tried, all of us have missed the point of life. We have lived defensively, trying to keep ourselves safe from your dangers in the world. Whether it be try to get our self-esteem established or try to get our security established, we're trying to live to keep ourselves safe. Instead of being a force in the world, an offensive being in the world, not offensive to offend, but offensive in the sense of taking charge, living our life, being who we are. The alcoholic and everybody else begins to act, and they close themselves off from the world, and they're living a shallow life of using their five senses to manage their world. And is he not a victim of the delusion that he can make it work, that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without God's help, because, look, if we don't have another source of power, this is all that there is, and we're correct for being self-centered. We're correct for trying to manage our world, because it's all we have. We think that's what life's about. We live as though we are an end in ourselves. Now, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. So here's the point. I can't manage my own life. I can't get things to work out. It just doesn't work. Where do I turn? Do I become a better actor? Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. I seem to not be able to manage life. Well, I'm limiting my life to my ego with 5 senses. What if there is more to life than that? What if there's more to me than my 5 senses and my ego? So this is the way it was explained to me. Let's say this is God. I heard in Sunday school that I got to look within for God. So I started thinking that God's in here. But then I learned from these AA people that God is everything, and that that's part of what I am too. There's more to me than just my ego. But I've been too narrow-minded to see that there's more to me than just my ego. I had to admit that my life is unmanageable by me. I've heard people in AA talk about how their life is more manageable than it used to be. I think they're missing the point. By nature, life is unmanageable. The man or the woman, his ego, her ego, using their 5 senses, is not capable of managing life. Life is too big. You know, we're trying to manage a life that we don't have any idea, for instance, of what the future holds. We don't have any idea what tomorrow holds. And yet we, with our 5 senses, are trying to manage the world, manage our own life. And we're afraid. It leads to fear. So what we could say, this is God. We could say that it's the vital 6th sense. We could say that what we're trying to do is break down this wall around our ego using the 12 steps in order to become God conscious. Now, some people would think God consciousness means I think about God all the time. I'm conscious of God all the time. But what if God consciousness is God being conscious in us? What if there's more to us than meets the eye? What if there's more to us than just our 5 senses and our ego? Yes, our ego is like a vehicle. It's like an instrument. It's a very technical instrument. It's a very well-designed instrument. But the ego-centered ego is trying to go it alone. It's not enough. It would be like this. Car's sitting out there at the curb, the engine's running and the tank is full of gas, but there's nobody driving it. And that car starts driving itself. Well, where is it going? It doesn't know where it's going or why it's going there. It doesn't have a purpose or a meaning. You get in the car becomes your instrument. The car by itself, without a driver, is an ego-centered car. Once it has a driver, then it becomes a God-centered car, or the driver-centered car would be more accurate. Let's read through a couple of the, so it's not that we're trying to figure out how to manage our life better. It's not that we're trying to be a better actor. It's that we are trying to admit that life is unmanageable for me going it alone, my ego with my 5 senses. It's not enough. Deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. This isn't about what religion you have or trying to prove God is good or is bad or does. This is about facing it that my ego on its own is never going to be able to manage life. I don't need to be a better actor. I need to understand that acting is never going to get the job done. Life is unmanageable. It's something that I'm trying to admit. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about this as we go. Another word that's used for this whole consciousness out here is the great reality. These are all things that are available to us, but we've shut ourselves off from it because we believe that our ego and our five senses is all that we are. There might be more to us than meets the eye. Can I admit there might be more to me than meets the eye? That's the point of part 2 of step 1, part 3 we're calling it. Life is unmanageable. So this AA guy told me, Dennis, we admitted 2 things. We alcoholics admitted that we were powerless over alcohol. And every person on this earth can admit that life is unmanageable. It's just the way it is. It's not something that you're defective because you can't seem to manage your life and everybody else is able to. Nobody can. Let me read a couple more things. We're not trying to get better at acting or managing life. We're taking inventory of the reality that life is unmanageable via ego and the 5 senses alone. It just doesn't work. We're admitting this simple reality, life is unmanageable. Now, if we go back to the guidebook, I'm going to read the bullets in the guidebook. Unmanageable, unable to achieve one's own purpose. Drinking or not, humans are not intended to be able to manage their own lives. We need daily help from Him, capital Him, who has all knowledge and power. That's another thing that's out here in this God consciousness, is all of the knowledge and all of the power. Our ego doesn't have any of that stuff. We have 5 senses, we have intelligence, but we don't have knowledge in the sense of what it's really about even. What's life really about? And we definitely don't have the power to live up to our philosophical convictions that we have. When we come to AA, our scorecards read 0. Our sponsors told us that our best thinking got us where we were. Usually we come with problems that have become astonishingly difficult to solve. In this portion of our program, we're going to examine the evidence of our lives. Let's take our sponsor's word for it. Our best thinking did get us here. It seems like we could do better if given a fresh start, but let's say our sponsors are right. We've done our best. Now let's take inventory of the current state of ourself. Where has our best gotten us? He is almost always on a collision course with someone or something, even though his motives are good. All right, so in taking step 1, part 3, we admitted that our lives had become unmanageable. The idea is that we're not trying to see where we've been wrong. We're trying to see where life is unmanageable. It's the nature of life. It's the way life is. We, with our ego, with our 5 senses, are incapable of managing life. So is every single buddy else on earth. It's not like the program is going to make us better at managing life. The program is going to give us a new way to live. And we're not going to be an actor or a manager anymore. We're going to become our authentic self. So each of us needs to look at these questions that are going to be posted on the video. And they're taken from page 52 in the big book. And it's this paragraph right here where we're taking inventory of our life to see if it is unmanageable. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. We take those statements, turn them into questions, and ask ourselves, is Dennis using his five senses, ever going to be able to solve this problem of life? Or do I need to look for something bigger? So let's take it at that. We're not trying to decide anything except, by nature, is life unmanageable? Is it the way it is? Is it the reality of it? So let's move to step 2.